Hey everyone, I'm back with the new video on caching strategies for Azure Cache for Redis in order to optimize the scalability and performance of your cloud applications. The agenda of this talk would be overview of caching strategies, where we will discuss why, when, how, and what needs to be taken care before applying any caching strategy, followed by the types of caching strategy like cache aside, lazy loading, read through, write behind, also known as write back caching strategies. At last, we'll get to know how to use the right strategy for your cloud applications. So let's jump to the overview of caching strategies. So before using any caching strategy or system, you should first ask yourself, like, why I need this, how it will benefit the application, where to implement in the application, and when is the right time to implement it. For that, you first understand like what caching strategy is. So it is basically defined as how the data is stored and retrieved or updated in the underlying cache interface of the application. Choosing the right strategy would significantly boost the overall performance and is crucial for scalability. Also, different caching strategies offer various trade-offs in terms of complexity, consistency, and performance, which we'll see in the coming slides. So let's talk about cache-aside caching strategy. So this is the simplest cache strategy among all the others. And the fundamental principle of data retrieval is simple. If the application needs the data, so it will first check if it is present in the cache, as we can see in the snippet here. So if it is not present, then the query will be sent to the data source, and the data is fetched, updated in the cache, and then returned back to the caller. The pros of this approach is it is easy to implement and reduces load on the data source. Also, cache holds only the requested data, thus keeping cache size cost effective. Also, data is written directly to the data source, so cache may have a period of inconsistency with the primary data source. So this we can say as a stale data and is a risk if not managed properly. Now let's talk about read-through. So read-through cache strategy is useful for read-heavy workloads. In this cache is responsible for fetching the data from the data source and sits in between your application and your data source. So if the data exists in the cache, read the data from cache, as we can see in the first point here. And if the data it doesn't exist in the cache, then it will ask the data source to provide and then update the cache and return to the application. Note that for any write operations in this strategy, the application will still go straight to the data source. The pros of this approach is it ensures that data consistency and reduces load on the data source. The data population for cache is handled by some separate cache provider or library. Cons is it can introduce latency as well when we need to get the data anytime a new read request comes through. Since the data is never cached, therefore needs to be loaded in cache. This delay can be tackled by warming the cache by issuing more likely queries manually. Now let's jump to write-through cache strategy. This is also useful for read-heavy workloads. This write operations are first applied to the cache and then the data source. So all you have to remember is writes to cache first and store in data source. When data is written, the cache stores the data and then forwards the write operation to the data source to ensure high consistency between both the systems. The pros of this approach is no new read request will experience delay while the cache requests it from the main database and offers highly consistent data between cache and your application. That means both of them will be always updated. The cons is it introduces high latency for write operations because each write operation must go to the cache and then to the data source. But we can tackle the cons by implementing write through with a read through cache. This way, application will get benefit of both the worlds and canceling each other's cons. Now let's talk about write behind, also known as write back caching strategy. It is almost same as the write through except one key detail. The application writes directly to the cache, but immediate updates or writes were not done on the data source. Instead, the data source is updated asynchronously. Pros of this approach is it improves the write performance of the application by writing to the data source with a delay. Pros of this approach is it improves the write performance of the application, thereby reducing the latency of write operations, because now the application is not directly updating or writing the items in the database, though these updates were taken care asynchronously by some other modules. So this opens up the potential for some cost savings and overall workload reduction. The cons of this approach is if the cache fails, this delay will possibly incur data loss, and if the batch or delayed write to data source has not yet occurred. So, how to choose the right caching strategy? So, to answer the question, like how to choose the right caching strategy, one should consider following factors. First is nature of your data. Example, does ordering matters? Application data access patterns. That is how application is using data, what all properties are fetched and used more often. Latency requirements. That is how much delay is permissible by the users of your application. Data consistency requirements. That is strong consistency is needed or weak consistency will work for you. Example, in analytical dashboards, weak consistency and minimum latency is permissible. So you have to consider these factors. Based on them, you have to select a hybrid of different caching strategies for your application. This way, you will get benefit of both the worlds, or I would say both the caching strategies, and this will help you to optimize the overall performance. So that's it for now. Thank you everyone for watching, and please subscribe and like my channel, as your subscribes and likes make me feel better to create more videos. Thank you and see you soon.